Continuing my journey through the complete Dick Tracy, or at least the complete Dick Tracy volumes that are available in my local library, I now come to Volume 17, 1956 to 1957. I've not read before any of the stories contained within this volume, although back in the early 90s, when I had a few Dick Tracy collected editions, I had one. I don't remember the name of it, but it was like a companion book to Dick Tracy. I think it might have been Dick Tracy, America's Most Famous Detective, or something like that, which was not so much a collection of Dick Tracy's stories as an analysis of the way the strip had evolved over the years. And some of the panels and some of the strips that are in this volume were in that volume. To illustrate various points. And I'll try and remember to talk about those particular strips when we get to them. But anyways, let's jump into it here. As seems to be standard with these volumes, there's two introductions. One is by Max Allan Collins, who would later become the writer on Dick Tracy after the original writer Chester Gould retired. And he analyzes the stories themselves and comments on their effectiveness, as well as what Chester Gould was trying to do. And then there's actually, it's not so much an introduction as an afterword, but there's an afterword here which talks about what was going on in Chester Gould's life at the time. And also mentions that this was the year of Dick Tracy's 25th anniversary, which in Chester Gould's life generated a lot of extra publicity for Dick Tracy, including television appearances, etc. Although none of the publicity from the 25th anniversary is reflected in these strips. But anyways, there was, as always, a lot of interesting insights and information, etc. from these two introductions. One introduction, one afterward. And I may, as I go through these strips and comment on them, incorporate some of the things I've learned from the introduction and the afterword. And I'll try and give credit whenever I do that. But we start off here with Flat Top Jr. and Joe. Oh, what was Joe's name again? Joe Period. Flat Top Jr. and Joe Period. So yeah, as you can see, this is Flat Top Jr.'s, has his face on the cover here. Now this is actually a story which continues from Volume 16. Volume 16 ended right in the middle of the story of Flat Top Jr. and Joe Period. Now, fortunately for me, my library had Volume 16, so I'm actually able to pick up the story and I know exactly who these characters are and what is happening in the story. As was mentioned in the introduction to the previous volume, Joe Period and Flat Top Jr., I guess especially Joe Period, who's got kind of like a James Dean-esque look, was created in response to both the teenage rebel look, which was popular, I guess, with Marlon Brando or James Dean, and also comment on the rising trend in juvenile delinquency, which was happening in this period, or at the very least was perceived as happening in this period. Like there was a lot of media about juvenile delinquency. I actually don't know the history or the sociology of what actually was going on in this period. But yeah, interesting to be reminded that the youth is going bad is not something new. It's the fear that the youth is going bad is kind of a tale of as old as time, so to speak. But that being said, there might well have been a rise in juvenile delinquency in this period, right? And it would be interesting to know what was causing it and what caused it to go down, if it went down, or all of that stuff. But We're going to bypass that because I don't know anything about it and continue with this story here. So, yes, Joe Period gets arrested and Flat Top Jr. escapes. Now, there's a little bit of an interruption for editorializing when Joe Period is visited by her mother. And he just says, take her away. And the mother says, no, son, I'm the delinquent one. Not you, I'm the one. She blames herself. As your mother, I made my mistake 15 years ago. I insisted on working in the factory alongside your dad when I should have been home caring for you. Your dad and I went out every night. Nights when you needed us, we neglected our church to carouse. We laughed at your first brush with the law. Thought it was funny. This is a little heavy-handed and seems quite conservative by today's standards, right? The problem with juvenile delinquency is women working outside of the house and neglecting the church to go out and have fun. Interestingly enough, though, Max Collins in his introduction says this was Chester Gould's liberal side coming through. I think Chester Gould was a lifelong conservative, but Max Allen Collins said this is him showing a little bit of a liberal side. So I'm somewhat hypothesizing here based on what Max Allen Collins said, but possibly during this time period, I guess the more conservative element would have just blamed juvenile delinquency on inherent moral rot or bad character. And maybe there was a liberal side to say that these kids are just a victim of their upbringing or society or something like that, perhaps. I don't know. But then we have the end to Joe Period. His mother commits suicide by jumping in front of a truck. And that's the end of his story. Then we're off with Flat Top. Flat Top Jr. So Flat Top Jr. has a car which can do everything. He's rigged it up himself. It's got TV. It's got food. And at one point, he even uses a smoke screen from the car to escape the police. Let me see if I can find that panel. Okay, I can't find it offhand, but it's in here somewhere. Introduction suggests that perhaps James Bond cars, which would come out, I guess, a few years later in the James Bond movies, were stealing the idea from Flat Top's car. And apparently Chester Gould thought so. When the first James Bond movie came out, Chester Gould thought they were ripping off his idea with James Bond's, Aston Martin car. But anyways, we go on to Flat Top's story. Sorry. Something I forgot to say to introduce this volume. I was planning on saying this, then I just forgot. These stories are okay. They're not, maybe they're not Dick Tracy's best, but they are at the very least interesting to read, because you never know where these stories are going, and that keeps you guessing as you read it, and that keeps you turning the page. In one of the Dick Tracy books I had in the early 90s, it may have been the same one I referenced earlier, Chester Gould said in an interview that he never plotted a story in advance, because he said, if I don't know where the story's going, how can the reader possibly know? Now, as I read through these stories, I'm always thinking, okay, he must have known a little bit in advance where these stories were going. But nevertheless, they do kind of read... Well, they do sometimes read like they are being made up as he goes along. And certainly either way, whether he was honest about that or not, they do have a lot of zigs and zags, and you never really know where the story is going to come back around to. So one of the things I've tried to train myself doing when I'm reading these volumes is not flip ahead. Because whenever I get a comic book collection, I always want to, first thing I do before I sit down to read it carefully is I want to flip through it, see what's coming up, see what all the interesting looking characters are going to be like, see what the interesting parts of it are going to be. But that will very much spoil the story for you, for me or for you. So I keep having to remind myself when I'm reading these books, don't flip ahead. Don't flip ahead. Just read it as they go and see where this convoluted story is going to. Which actually brings me to a spoiler alert here on this video. I'm going to be spoiling some things about the story as I talk through it, so if you think you might like to get these out from the library yourself and read them someday or buy them off of Amazon, etc., then you might want to stop listening now. Anyways, that disclaimer out of the way, back to the story. So Flat Top Jr. hides out in a room, and there's the daughter of the landlord, girl named Skinny, becomes interested in him, even though Flat Top is portrayed as kind of a sullen jerk. Makes the mother cry. That just excites the interest of the daughter all the more. And she's, the introduction says she's kind of a beatnik type character. I guess, this was the 1950s, so this was when the beatniks were going on. Maybe. But her infatuation with Flat Top is going to turn out to cause trouble. Flat Top Jr. Is going to turn out to cause trouble when she tries to enter his pictures, his paintings into the contest, which enrages him because he's trying to lie low. So we don't actually see it, but off panel he strikes her. And then when she tries to blackmail him in revenge for being hit, he loses it and kills her. And again, very fascinating panels, right? Chester Gould sure knew how to create atmosphere. Here she is here. And then she's gone. So we don't actually see it happen, but presumably she's been thrown off. And that's confirmed later, where she is confirmed to be dead after having been thrown off. And then we get her ghost clinging to Flat Top Jr. Just constantly clinging around her neck, and he's being driven crazy by it. As Max Allan Collins points out in his introduction, it's left ambiguous whether or not this is a hallucination that Flat Top has, just because of his guilty conscience, or if this is really just a ghost. It was rare for Dick Tracy to turn to the supernatural, although we are approaching the Moon period, where he would get into the science fiction, but not so many outright ghost stories. But this is one of the exceptions. So again, it's story zigs and zags all over as this chase goes on. Max Allan Collins refers to it as the typical convoluted Dick Tracy villain chase. I think I'm quoting him correctly. Where it zigs and zags all over, but This one has a bit of an unusual ending in that Flat Top actually doesn't get caught by the police. He just runs off to the countryside where he is tormented by this ghost or by his illusion of the ghost. And the last we see of him, he's got this, what do you call this? Flame canister, trying to burn the ghost off, and then just jumps with the ghost hanging on to him. And then the character says, I saw it all, but I don't believe it. And then the character is gone, kind of. But certainly gone temporarily, where we don't know what happened to him and we move on to another story. Actually, we get a little bit of an interlude here where Dick Tracy and Sam get crew cuts. Yep. So Dick Tracy says, "Cool boy, real cool." And Sam says, "Yeah, we're modernizing the department all around. Get hep, get a crew. Old bosom buddy and square. Get that mattress stuffing off your fat knob and join us cats before it's too late." So, yeah, this is always the interesting thing with reading something old, is you get an insight into old culture. I'd always associated crew cuts with reactionary conservatism. And I guess by the 1960s, that's the image that it had. But I guess for a period here in, 1956, a crew cut was the new hip cut. So Sam gets one, and then Dick Tracy gets one. And as Max Allan Collins says in his introduction, fortunately, they don't last long. The hair grows back on both of them pretty soon. But Dick Tracy's haircut is interrupted by a bullet flying in. And when Dick Tracy investigates, we see the perpetrator is a little girl holding a gun, a smoking gun. Yeah, and these panels here were what I talked about earlier when I said they were incorporated into that book I had on Dick Tracy back in the 90s. These are some of the iconic panels from Dick Tracy. And when I looked this up on Google, and there's a Dick Tracy fandom wiki page or something, apparently this panel was used to drum up publicity with like newspaper ads for the storyline, which I guess was the thing that they did. So who is she? Is she guilty or is she innocent? Read Dick Tracy to find out. So that iconic image of a little girl with a smoking gun was used to drum up interest in the strip. And it turns out, spoilers I guess, that the little girl did not shoot the gun. She was framed by someone who wanted to make it look like she had done it. According to the Dick Tracy wiki, there is some speculation that maybe this was Chester Gould's next attempt to make another cute kid character. So Chester Gould had going back to the Max Allan Collins information, Chester Gould had a lot of success with his Sparkle Plenty character, who was the daughter of B.O. Plenty and what was her name? Gertrude something. And that was a big merchandising success. They made dolls, they sold play sets, and he was always trying to recreate that with various cute kids. And I think every subsequent year there's some cute kids character who shows up. But none of them actually caught on like Sparkle Plenty did. And this character here goes to live with Liz and her husband Jimmy. Liz, the new policewoman. But then she just disappears and is never heard from again. So whatever happens to her, I guess presumably she goes to live with Liz and Jimmy. And maybe just leads a quiet life from there on out. Yeah. Anyways. So this is another story which has some great zigs and zags in it. It turns out that Speck, the little girl's name is Speck, her mother is in love with a villain, Ivy. And so they kill her husband so that she's free to marry Ivy, and they try and pin it on the girl. But then... And Ivy is really rich because he's a counterfeiter. So he's surrounded by all this luxury, and he's treating his new wife or new girlfriend with all these trinkets. But she had left a watch to be repaired. And that's a clue that the police get a hold of, Dick Tracy and Sam. So when Ivy finds out about this, he becomes really upset. But then he recovers himself, and it looks like everything's settled until he takes her to a very fancy restaurant which overlooks sharks. Yeah, Beauty and the Beast, you might say, Madame. These waters are the most heavily shark-infested waters in the world. So somebody is going to get knocked off to the sharks, right? Who's it going to be? Ivy's planning on throwing her in. But then she senses that he's going to do it and just suddenly throws him in. So this was a twist that I don't think many readers saw coming. I wouldn't have seen it coming, except these strips were, once again, reprinted in that 90s book I had as meant to be illustrative of Chester Gould's great storytelling, how he was able to tell a story in panels. So he falls here. He's all yours. He's in the sharks. Ivy tries to swim for it, but nosebleed. I must have bumped the bottom once they smell blood. And then because of that nosebleed, he becomes doomed to the sharks. And then this is the last panel. At least that was the last panel I thought. That was the last one that was included in the 1990s companion book that I had. But it's interesting to read the whole story because that is actually not the end of Ivy when you read the whole story. Yes, there's another twist. Ivy survives. Now, he's lost an arm to the shark, which I guess in retrospect you can kind of see here with the shark right by his arm. And you can kind of see the arm broken off there, huh? Again, rather gruesome stuff considering this was this was being printed in a family newspapers in the 1950s. But there we go. So Ivy is still alive, and he's going to want revenge now. So what's going to happen now? And this is where it gets good. These twists and turns that I was talking about earlier. Who knows what's going to happen? He's here in the bed recovering. But meanwhile, Liz, the policewoman, is driving. And then all of a sudden, there's Flat Top again and the ghost. I forgot all about Flat Top. He was like, I think they said 2 months ago in Max Allan Collins' introduction. He had been out of the strip for 2 months, but here he comes back. and there's a secret villain lair that Liz tracks him to. And so now we have the resolution of Flat Top's story here, where he gets shot in the head. And the resolution of the ghost, which takes a few days later. But yeah, so as Max Allan Collins mentions in his introduction, up until this point here, maybe, it's left ambiguous whether or not this is a real ghost or if it's just Flat Top's guilty conscience giving him hallucinations. Oh, and something I forgot to mention. Flat Top's hair has completely turned white, I guess as a result of just being scared by this ghost. But yeah, it's left ambiguous. But then, once Flat Top is dead, and there's no one to hallucinate, but yet we've got that ghost flying off into the heavens. You've paid, Flat Top. At last you've paid. Ah ha 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 ha. Tra la 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 la. He paid. Tra la. So Flat Top is dead now, huh? So I guess this is just, at this point, it's just got to be really a ghost. Okay, so back to the Ivy storyline. Ivy comes back to confront the woman who threw him to the sharks, and there's a bang, and she's dead. And then he goes back to his secret lair where the cops are waiting for him, but he's got a remote control that's going to blow the whole thing up. Now there's somebody cutting the wires, which seems to foil his plan, although we find out later that the wrong wire was cut, and then actually the reason that the explosion didn't go off is because he had the battery upside down. So, yeah, that's... and again, Max Allan Collins compares this to a James Bond type scenario, a secret lair with a self-destruct button, etc. Oh, and then we have the Christmas. And this, again, is Speck, the cute girl here, is brought in. She's, I guess, a deaf mute. So they do sign language here to sign out Merry Christmas, spelling the words. And here is Bonnie Braids, Dick Tracy's daughter, Sparkle Plenty, and little Wingy, the adopted daughter of Beale Plenty and Gertrude. So, yeah, all the little girl characters that Chester Gould has tried to make into merchandisable characters, and then Speck. But, yeah, this is just about the last we see of Speck. After this. So, there's more to talk about. I'm really only halfway through this volume, but I'm out of time here. This camera will only go up to 30 minutes before it automatically shuts off. I may film a part 2, just to comment briefly on the second half of this book, but I think I've said most of what I want to say for part 1, so we'll stop it here.